Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council, navigating the human experience together.
Hafide Tero, and welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry. How feasible is renewable offshore energy for the Marianas? That's either wind or marine hydrokinetic energy. And what does that have to do with the humanities? Well, we're going to answer at least one of those questions on our show today. Our guests are here to speak about a new undertaking in the Marianas by East Carolina University and the U.S. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Our guests are project lead, Dr. Jennifer McKinnon, professor of history at East Carolina University, and PhD student and maritime archaeologist, Maddie Roth. Guys, welcome back to the Marianas. You've been here before. Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So Jen, I think anybody who has any interest in like World War II history in the Marianas, especially maritime history, is probably familiar with you and your work. Maddie, you've helped her with projects, so yeah, it's nice to have you back here. I do want to answer one of the questions, which was, we actually don't know right now if offshore renewable energy is feasible for the Marianas, but the good news is, we do know we have a lot of maritime heritage related to our indigenous cultures, and that's what you guys are here for. Do I have the project, a synopsis of the project correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So the project is actually the maritime heritage of the Mariana Islands, which includes Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. And as you said, it is funded by BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management. And the emphasis on this is that it is community engaged, community forward, proactive and holistic, and it's one of the reasons why I actually took on the project, because as you know, a lot of my archaeology and research involves the community. Some of the projects have been community ideas that we've worked on together. Some have been ones that I've applied for grants for, but it's always involved community members, researchers, students, interns. And so for me, this project was important, getting on board to make sure that all the maritime heritage of the Mariana Islands is known in some capacity. Offshore wind energy projects get off the ground.
It's cool because, you know, there is more documentation going on as far as, you know, the indigenous maritime traditions and stuff like this. So, and you're coming in to kind of add to that.
Right.
And maybe also kind of consolidate all the resources. But can you give us a big picture idea of what the project will involve and timeline? Because I think a lot of times when people hear about like federal projects, they get a little anxious.
Absolutely.
So first things first.
Yeah. So timelines are important, and I understand the reticence of working with the federal government and the military buildup and the long history and past out here. And so it is important to put it into perspective in terms of timing. So this project is a 4-year project of data gathering and community consultation and relationship building. It is, as I said, proactive. There is no intent right now for the federal government or that I know of the CNMI government to put offshore wind energy in place. We do know, that CNMI and Guam have an ambitious plan for, renewable energy. And so this is really to sort of get ahead of that process process and allow the community to be involved in, first of all, identifying the important sites to them that will be protected within a safe space that they decide or determine and help develop, but also develop a best practices document that tells the federal government not just who's at the table, but what the table looks like and where the table is and who and how that table is going to be laid out. So this is a 4-year project. Even from the get-go, at which point, say, CNMI has an interest in offshore renewable energy, you're at least 10 years out to like a construction, right? So that is well and truly into the future, and there are lots of off-ramps as well through that process, and the BOEM representative that's out here with us can talk to that a little bit more within meetings with agencies and community members.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit in detail about what we can anticipate over those 4 years and who you're looking to engage with, who you would like to talk to. Could you give us an idea before we ask Maddie about her part? What are the big picture outcomes from this project?
So the big picture outcomes are, nobody has done an inventory of maritime heritage complete within the Mariana Islands. We have pockets within federal agencies and local governments, but putting it all together. And a lot of that has been focused on European, World War II, and so we would like to focus more on some of the traditional maritime heritage, traditional cultural properties and use areas, and have an understanding of that, right? So a database, and then secondly, a community directed and designed best practices for the federal government in engaging with the community. So guidelines and practices, what to look for, what to do, what languages, how are they going to engage in that federal process?
To make sure the local voice is heard.
Absolutely.
And considered.
Absolutely.
And incorporated.
Absolutely.
Maddie, you've been here before several times with Jen on various projects. What's your role in this project?
So in this project, my role is really to think about the intangible heritage element. And so when we say maritime heritage, it's really those tangible archaeological sites, things like shipwrecks, navigation buoys, in some cases human-made or modified structures that might now be submerged. But there's always, of course, been that intangible element as well, and that's the way that people engage with maritime areas. It can be anything from navigation and wayfinding to fishing, to snorkeling and diving activities, to swimming, to practices and belief systems, even collection of resources for like arts. And one of the things that I'm so excited about with this project is that we'll be able to dig into that, because that's really where I think people sort of come alive in thinking about their relationship with place. So my role is to work on developing an intangible heritage management system that really is practitioner-centric, and thinking about determining the best way for that knowledge to stay within its practitioner communities and for the government to recognize that relationship.
You are so lucky, I think, because you're going to be learning a lot.
Yes, I'm so excited to speak with practitioners and folks who are out on the water, nearby the water, who want to share their stories, who want to engage with this, and also to recognize that long, long and deeply felt history between really people and place. So whether it's here on Saipan, Tinian, Rota, or Guam, talking to folks who really know the maritime landscape.
So your area of expertise is archival research. What are some of the resources? I know it's early in the project. This is like, what, day one here in Saipan. But like, what are some of the resources you're going to be looking into, you anticipate?
We've already started doing some of the archaeological background research, so looking through old reports and inventories that might already exist. We're also going to archives and especially looking at photographic records. Sometimes, there's really sort of sparse written records about practices, and that's usually a bias as to whoever was writing things down. But going through, really with a keen eye, photographic records and trying to determine anyone's really use of the marine space. So photographs of boating practices, fishing practices, recreational activities. We've already done a little bit of that work. We've had some really awesome responses from agencies on island who hold photographic collections and archives. And then I think part of that is also pairing up people's memories and really experiences in places with some of those records.
Cool. Jen, when we say offshore, like what distance are we talking about that you guys are looking into?
Yeah, so we're the project actually extends out to the EEZ. So, and when you talk about islands, you can talk about the water and underwater cultural heritage, but it also extends on shore and on land, and as Maddie says, through intangible processes as well. So, it's hard to really draw boundaries, right? Because
the exclusive economic zone is 12 miles or 3 miles?
So we've got 3 miles for the state for CNMI.
That we control, yes.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. And EEZ is 100.
200
miles. 200
okay, I'm
miles,
just
sorry.
off by a few miles.
Just yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So you guys are looking at for sure, traditional navigational sea routes.
Yeah.
Where, navigators look for sea life. These are things,
Yep,
it sounds
absolutely.
like you would want to, we find this sea life in this area.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's really important to understand those corridors of movement and, even though the EEZ is a prescribed boundary, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a boundary for the communities that live on the islands. And so when you talk about those practices, they can extend a fair distance and connect communities as well. But it is place-based, so we do have to stay within some boundaries.
Let's talk about your first workshop. I understand you have 3 or 4 activities planned throughout the 4 months. Start us off there. When and what you want to accomplish.
Yep. So the first workshop is going to be in spring, in March, and we hope to. And when we say workshop, we kind of mean workshops. So it's going to be like a week long of sort of meeting with different groups because there's different stakeholders. Obviously fishers, people who collect materials to make art, or spearfishers, anyone with knowledge of maritime heritage. So we'll be meeting with them to really kind of lay out the rules of engagement and the design of the database, because we want to make sure, as Maddie said, that information is protected. We don't want people sharing information with us that wouldn't be protected, right? And so we want to make sure that the community decides, how that information is collected and where it will be, maintained and who would have access to it. So a lot of it is just making people aware of the project and also kind of laying out that database for the traditional cultural use areas and properties, because we know how to make a database of shipwrecks, right? I mean, we've been doing it, but we need work on the intangible. And it's hard to draw a circle or put a dot on a space that is significant. And so that's what we're going to be working on in the first workshop.
Yeah, and talking about putting a dot, I'm thinking about fishermen. They might know hey, this has traditionally been a good place to fish,
right.
but now it's not. That's like a moving dot, right?
Yeah. And we don't necessarily even want the dot, but what we do want is, this is an area that's important to us. You may not want to share why it's important, but we want to know that it's important so that in the future, if something, down the line, the federal government can say, hey, there's a circle here. There's some important information that we need to seek. So it's building those relationships earlier on and saying, like, who do I go and talk to? Is it the traditional fishing? Is it, who is it that we need to talk to?
Well, that's kind of cool. Like, you would even respect the fact that if the culture were to say, this is a sacred land and we're not actually going to give you the details, you will document that. This is sacred land. We were not provided the details, but
absolutely.
It needs
and
to be acknowledged.
When the time comes that the federal process, is in place and there's review, that's the time at which, the community can share information or just say, like
what they want to say.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And then that would be outlined in the best practices.
All right. So that's workshop 1 coming next spring. I imagine you're wanting people to contact you to, I don't want to say sign up, but show their interest in participating before then. We'll give you an opportunity to share your contacts later on in the show. I'm going to take a break and continue with the rest of the program. Yeah?
Right.
Okay.
Sounds good.
We'll be back after this break.
Hafaday, Zantiro. I'm Leo Pangilinan with the Northern Marianas Humanities Council. We'd like to take a moment to thank our generous sponsors who have made possible the many programs in our community like this show. We couldn't have done it without them. And if you value the work we do and would like to make a contribution to our efforts, we ask that you consider making an in-kind or cash contribution to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council. Any amount is appreciated, and donations of up to $5,000 qualify for an educational tax credit. We appreciate your partnership and support. Sizus Maasi, Olomai, and thank you.
Welcome back. We're chatting today with Dr. Jennifer McKinnon and PhD student Maddie Roth about an ongoing project related to offshore renewable energy and maritime heritage here in the Marianas. Jen, we were talking about the first part of the project, workshop 1. What can we anticipate after that?
So we will have a second workshop where we come together and work on the mapping process. So we're going to have a series of participatory mapping where we lay out maps that are of the island, of the bathymetry of the sea, of the night sky as well, because you can't separate nature from culture, and navigation practices rely on stars, and so making sure that traditional cultural properties and use areas they're in a 3D format. It's not just a map, it's 3D. So we really want to engage practitioners in sort of defining some areas that are significant and need to be sort of registered.
I'm so glad you're the one helping with this project, because you're bringing in like your history of working here for like almost 2 decades, maybe.
Yeah.
It seems like.
I think so.
So you're aware of these things off the bat, so that's really great. Talking about mapping, climate change, of course, has changed the ocean, and I understand, Maddie, that that's also something you're looking into as part of this project.
Definitely. One of the things that we're really interested in is thinking about a database that isn't just relevant today, but is going to be relevant to the future. And in order to do that, you have to talk to the folks who are experiencing change every single day. And we know from developing relationships that that's traditional cultural practitioners. They're the people who are seeing changes in the resources that they have always worked with. And so one of the things that we are hoping to do with this project is to identify not only a resource, but also variables in the environment that may threaten or endanger that resource.
So even maybe talking to fishermen, longtime fishermen who remember the way it was back in the day and what they're seeing today, where the fish are, where the fish aren't.
Exactly.
What kind of fish they're seeing. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think an example of how this might be incorporated into the database is looking at where fishers may be fishing off the coast now, looking at then some environmental criteria that suggest where those fish might be going. And so when we start drawing boundaries around significant fish stocks or significant fish habitat as they're related to those practices of fishing, we can say, here's where we need to be looking now, and here's where we also need to be looking in the future if those fish stocks are predicted to change.
Wow, that's going to be a great tip for fishermen in the future.
Yeah, right?
Okay, so what about this part of the project, the field, I don't want to say field test, what am I thinking?
Well, it's case studies,
Okay.
right? Yep, case studies. So that's, we're choosing a few sites that are going to be case studies and thinking about how they are important to the community and how they're protected, and sort of running through some thoughts about what would be the best practices for thinking about protecting these sites and their potential for harm through natural or cultural impacts, you know, whether that be climate change or development of offshore wind energy or anything in between. So we're going to work with the community to choose some particular sites that might be of interest to them and go out. And that could be a view shed, right? It could be climbing to the top of Mount Tapachao and thinking about navigation and view sheds.
And
Because
what? I'm sorry.
View sheds. Like,
What's a view shed?
A view shed is like what you're looking out at. What is significant to you? So I imagine when you're traveling around the island, you have a spot that's special to you and a view that is meaningful to you. And if there are maritime heritage related meaning and in those view sheds, that's something that we would consider part of traditional cultural property.
Okay. And then you're not done yet. I understand you're going to have a final workshop or a series of workshops.
We will. The last sort of series of workshops, or workshop 3, is that best practices document. So that's when we have to really put on our thinking caps and think about, you know, what are the best ways for the federal government to engage this community? What specifically about that? So, you know, when you think about like restricted access to lands because of military buildup, you know, saying within the document to be aware of the restriction already of access, you know, to particular areas. So they're kind of general guidelines, and then they can be slightly more specific as well. You know, it could be what language reports are written in. You know, there's all kinds of best practices. And this isn't a brand new project. This is building on another project that happened in Hawaii and then off the coast of Oregon and California with tribes there. So we're building a process of a community sort of proactive, you know, engagement before anything comes through down the line.
Very good. This database, is it going to be accessible to the public?
So that is something that is going to be decided by the working groups. Absolutely.
Okay, not by the federal government
Correct.
and not by you.
No.
Love it.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
One of the exciting things I read about the project was that it's also going to involve some teaching material for the students based on all the information you gather, which is so cool because we need more of that, especially like in our classrooms, things that teach the indigenous culture. Can you share a little bit? I know it's 4 years in the future. But
I know. Well, it's important to me because I feel like as I've worked with the community over time, there's so many amazing projects that are already happening on the island. And so not creating something new, but supporting grassroots efforts on the island. So we have funding and support to uplift existing education programs and incorporate the information that we're learning and make sure that that knowledge transfer happens across generations. So something for the K through 12, and really targeting, you know, existing programs that are already doing great work and just make sure that they have the resources that they need. And if this project produces more of that, then making sure that we can get that there.
Well, it sounds like you already have, you're already hitting the ground running. You already have a lot of contacts that you're engaging with. If anybody is interested in contributing, how can they find out more or get in touch with you to say, yeah, I want to participate in the workshop, or, make a connection?
Yep, absolutely. So, I'll give you my email address, which is McKinnon, McKinnonje at ecu.edu.
Say it one more time.
McKinnon, McKinnonje at ecu.edu. You can email me. Also look in the newspapers and listen for American Memorial Park talks. We will also be putting out press releases about the meetings and spreading the word through the community and some of the relationships that we've already built out here. So listen to your cousins and your brothers and your sisters, because they'll be talking about it when we try and get the word out.
Okay, looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Guys, thank you both for your work and for taking time to come and share with us about the project or here early on. Any final thoughts before we go, Maddie?
Well, I know that right before we began this, we were just chatting about how passionate people are, and people protect what they love, and that's really what this project is about, is finding the best way forward to make sure that those locally held management practices are upheld if and when federal processes do come to the island.
I'm excited to be back. I'm happy to be working with the people, and if I didn't think that this project wasn't really community focused and sort of forward thinking in terms of engaging the community, I wouldn't be involved. So it's nice to be back with people that I like working with, and working on something that is meaningful at multiple levels for me in terms of research, but also for the community and the protection of sites that are important to them.
Well, thanks for bringing your expertise, both of you, to our islands once again.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
Thanks.
Our guests today have been Dr. Jennifer McKinnon. She's a professor of history at East Carolina University, and PhD student and maritime archaeologist Maddie Roth. They are working on a project with the U.S. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management to document the maritime heritage here in the Marianas. And as Jennifer said, you can contact her if you would like more information or if you would like to participate in the discussion. This has been your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
Your Humanities Half Hour has been made possible in part by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Democracy demands wisdom. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. For more information or to share your thoughts, contact the Northern Marianas Humanities Council at nmhcouncil.org or on social media at 670 Humanities. That's 670 Humanities.